Which made this?
But we go from one jealous Scully episode to Chris Carter's take on it. Syzygy, which is essentially Chris Carter's attempt to write a Darren Morgan episode. It deals with cosmic astral alignment, where on this rare day, where these two girls who were born at the same time, on the same day and year, in the same town, their birthday coincides with this alignment of these planets that then make everybody super duper hostile towards each other. Just like, it's like an uber period that all their paranoia and aggressive emotions are heightened. The problem is Mulder and Scully go to this town of Comity, and they're already sniping at each other before they even get there. Now, I know there's been some kind of uncomfortable awkwardness between them this season, especially in episodes like Oubliette and even especially like Paperclip. They've been at odds at times, more so than ever before. But yet they start out this episode giving directions and really snapping. Now, apparently a lot of the issues that Scully brings up in this episode were inspired, if you will, by stuff that was going around the forums, like the fact that Scully never gets to drive, or that Mulder is always ditching Scully. And that is, you know, honestly, you try and get through a single fan fiction where it's not mentioned about Mulder ditching Scully. It's almost impossible. So I get why this kind of stuff would be, you know, if they're seeing the fans bring this up in the forums and that at the time, it seems fair to bring it up. Except it comes off as Scully just being bitchy, and I really don't like that. I really don't like it, because it just makes it sound like Scully's being, you know, I know Chris Carter sees Mulder as the hero and Scully's just there to tag along, and that pisses me off, and we'll get into that with some stuff a bit in a couple of episodes. But yeah, it comes off as Scully just being whiny, like this whiny little woman who's constantly telling Mulder off. Now, Mulder is really dickish in this episode, but some of it is super defensive, and it is funny that he hits on Detective White, but the second that she pounces on him, he's like, oh wait, he's so awkward with women, it's hilarious. But this episode feels really vindictive and nasty towards the fans and that, you know, that these genuine grievances are just thrown away as only coming up because of this cosmic alignment. But I still find the episode hilarious. I so shouldn't. But Mulder and Scully sniping at each other, honestly, there is so much sexual tension here. You're just sat there going, oh my god, would you two just go have sex already? It's that kind of bad. I mean, I can't help it. Again, this jealous Scully, I've always said I hate that the only really real women characters in this show are either there to be victims or femme fatales to make Scully jealous. I don't know if I said that in another tiering video or in my X-Files game review, but yeah, that is one of my issues with this show, and I don't like that this comes straight after War of the Coprophages. But whereas that was done in a fun, light-hearted, look at Scully be jealous kind of way, this one, it just, again, it's because it's from the outset. You don't see, it's like The Shining. It's like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. there's no like build up to this hostility. It would have been nice to see them slowly turn for. I know in a 42-minute kind of window you're struggling for time to do that build up, but I just think it would have been nice to see that build up a bit more. But I shouldn't like the jealousy in this episode. But it is so funny to watch Scully walking around going, detective like this, detective like that. Smoking and all that stuff. It would have made more sense to see Mulder smoking, seeing as he used to smoke. But I guess it's fun to see them do something different. But nothing else about this episode I particularly am all that keen on. Like, the girls. I don't like the girls. And unfortunately, this episode starts out Chris Carter's obsession with doppelganger powers. Now, these girls aren't doppelgangers. I mean, they dress alike, they do their hair alike, but they don't look alike or that. But they have the same power that if you put them in the same room, shit goes to hell. As Fight Club. And then +1. It's really... I know this is the beginning. This is the first one. And I guess in a way he took that and built upon it. But yeah, I think watching this after watching Fight Club and +1, you really see how these abilities are rehashed. And that can be a little frustrating. But I don't really like the girls. They're just these goths that just hate. It's not even done in a clever, teenage angst kind of way. Say like Buffy or whatever. I don't like them. The townsfolk, they kind of, again, they're like the prototype for Carter's postmodern Prometheus town of hostiles. I also don't like... So there's this bit where they find this cross-dressing doctor who they think is the evil party. And there's something to be said there. 90s kind of hunting down the cross-dresser. That's not why they go after him, but they find out that, and you're just like, oh no. But there's this bit where Mulder's sniffing the air and he's like, oh, somebody's wearing my favourite perfume. Now, I swear to this day, I thought the catchline was that it turned out the Doctor was wearing his favourite perfume. Turned out I was wrong. I've been Mandela affecting this episode. Turns out no, it's just Mulder sniffs Scully and then it's just like, oh, it must be Detective White. And I'm like, no, you missed up a prime opportunity. It would have been perfect to reveal that it had actually been the Doctor. There's a lot of missed opportunities here. I don't like that. It's really weird that one of the basketball players that Margie and Terry are watching is named Craig Wilmore, which of course is the main character in the X-Files FMV game. Which we'll actually get to at some point, even though it's not on this list. That's really distracting. But I still like this episode. I know I shouldn't. It's just so bizarre and funny, and if nothing else, it really makes me appreciate when Mulder and Scully are being nice to each other. I really have an issue. It feels a little sexist, and again, it's not... It's again putting Mulder up on this pedestal and making it look like he's always being brought down by Scully. It's not done in a clever bad blood way where you see that they see each other in this way but they still respect each other for the way that they see each other. Even though they see, oh, you're always constantly annoying me now. It just, I get that it's because of the cosmic alignment. I get that. But I just feel a lot of the issues that are brought up here that are never brought up again. We have to have stuff like Never Again and that for Scully to bring up about her desk or whatever. I just feel when you've got stuff like dealing with actual issues, like writing wise for how the characters are handled, you shouldn't throw them off in this kind of like I guess they did with the Layla Harrison character in Alone and Scary Monsters. They don't give a very good view. It feels like they're mocking the viewpoints of genuine issues, and I don't like that. I don't. But otherwise, the episode is just, I can't help. It is nowhere near, War of the Coprophages level. As much as I know I shouldn't, I can't help it. I have to put this in A. It's so bizarre. Sometimes I wonder if you have to be smoking something to watch it. I just enjoy it. And I think David and Gillian's acting brings a lot to these lines of sometimes awkward dialogue. Everybody else is just there. The actress who plays Detective White, she's alright, she's competent. Everybody else, it's not that they're bad at acting, I just feel that they're there. I feel David and Gillian really steal the show in this one. I definitely think it should not have come straight after War of the Coprophages to have two Jealous Scully episodes that close together, unless Carter is trying to again make fun of the Jealous Scully trope. I don't know, but anyway, we go from two light-hearted episodes to a nice dark one in Grotesque. Mulder profiling, supposedly. I apologise, my chair is missing a couple of screws, so it's quite squeaky. This episode, I'm going to get a lot of flack for. If you thought I was going to get flack for my views on season 3 generally, so Grotesque with guest star Kurtwood Smith as Mulder's ex-BSU mentor, who taught Mulder that you must become the monster to catch the monster. Who we have never ever heard of before. Who we never, even when we met Reggie Perdue and that, we never got any inclination of this other guy. But apparently this Bill Patterson absolutely absolutely beats down Mulder, makes him feel like shit because he respects Mulder. I'm like, okay, that's one way of doing it, I guess. So Patterson and his partner, or subordinate, Nemhauser, who has really weird chemistry with Scully in this episode. I genuinely thought that he was going to ask her out. Unfortunately, then, of course, he had to die because of that desire. But yeah, they had some interesting chemistry that really distracted me in this episode. I was like, oh, are they going to hook up? So these two are investigating this slew of murders, and apparently Patterson goes via Skinner's office to get Mulder and Scully, particularly Mulder, involved to help catch this killer. So they catch this one guy, this artist, who's been doing some murders. But we find out, twist at the end, that Patterson has continued the murders. And he called Mulder in to catch him. I don't know. This episode it's a bit smelly. It doesn't add up completely. And also Mulder's profiling. Now, with Mulder profiling, honestly, you read any fan fiction that involves Mulder profiling, he always goes super, super dark, which is what he does in this episode. And I think that's where the trope comes from. Except, this episode episode involves a lot of Mulder just standing and staring at stuff. There's one scene, literally one scene, where you see him actually doing research. I don't know what Scully's doing while he's doing this, because they're not working together. And then that ends up biting her in the ass, because she ends up trying to find out what's going on with Mulder. And that's kind of sweet, but at the same time it makes her go really small. Like, her worry makes her super small and vulnerable, and I'm like, that's kind of sweet, but at the same time, but you have one scene of Mulder doing research on gargoyles, because this character, Mostel, seems to think that there's this, you know, he's been drawing gargoyles, he's been sculpting gargoyles, he seems to have this obsession, so for whatever reason, and Mostel's insisting that he's been possessed by some evil spirit. Mulder starts in, doing research on gargoyles. It's one scene in a library. And for the rest of the episode, he just stands there staring at pictures. Scully turns up at his apartment, and he's wallpapered his apartment with these charcoal drawings of this evil being. And, I mean, that would be interesting if maybe we had some kind of, I don't normally ask for these kind of things, but some kind of voiceover more. I mean, there is a little bit, but at the end, but it would have been good to have some kind of voiceover from Mulder to see into his psyche, other than, I know it's they do well in a kind of show don't tell kind of way, in this show sometimes struggles with. But yeah, it would have been nice to see Mulder do more work other than just standing there in the in Mostel's studio and stuff like that. I get that he's trying to put his, I don't know, I get that he's putting himself in the mindset of Mostel. I get that he's soaking it all in and trying to, and you're dealing with thought processes and that, and the only way, I guess, to show how this is affecting Mulder is to have stuff like the charcoal drawings in his apartment and that. But yeah, I really struck, and there's a bit where Mulder chases the perpetrator, who's limping, except then when you see Patterson, he's not limping. And it seems like that is a key thing that a profiler particularly would take as a characteristic of the person that he was chasing. But this never comes up. And you're like, okay, now I get that they're trying to hide that it's Patterson until the last minute, because they're building so much paranoia trying to implicate Mulder. But it's just not 100% believable. There were times where I was like, maybe? And when Scully finds the Stanley knife that Mulder randomly took from evidence to touch it, to feel it. Now that makes sense, again, in the profiling mindset. But it doesn't make sense that he wouldn't put it back, that he wouldn't have recorded it. I can't remember if he recorded it. But he just randomly leaves his prints on it and everything. There's a lot of things in this episode that do not add up for me at all. I love the mood. Like, visually, it's, there's some nice cinematography. I do like some of Scully's worry where she's like, I've been calling your phone, why didn't you answer? And he's like, oh, I turned it off. And she's like, wait, what? So yeah, there's some nice interactions between Mulder and Scully. I love seeing Mulder do this profiling. We really have not had much profiling since, like, season 1? I think we had Lazarus and Young at Heart. We didn't really have much profiling in the same way during season 2. So, and we don't really get much of it past this episode, to be honest. So, I mean, we get some, but I'm just saying this seems to be like the big thing that says, you know, this is how dark Mulder can get when he's profiling. There's a lot of things that don't add up here, you know, that don't connect. There's just the whole reveal with it turning out Patterson is the killer. who kills his partner, which I assume was the only way to try and draw more attention to himself. I have no clue. But yeah, I just don't feel like everything slots together on this one. Kurtwood Smith is a good guest star. He plays Patterson well. There's a joke to be made about all of Mulder and Scully's superiors being balding, bespectacled men, I guess. But yeah, I'm gonna get so much flack for this, but this episode just does not do it for me. I can't explain it. There's just some dialogue here that doesn't work. There's just choices here that don't work. I'm going to have to put it in B. I'm sorry. I'm going to get so much hate. I get it. But it just... This is not a Die-Hand Diverlet's thing. It just didn't do it for me. And it's certainly not one that I go back to. It's not bad by any means. I just don't feel it's anywhere near as good or fulfilling as it could be. From that, we head on to more mythology with Piper Maru, named after Gillian's daughter. And this is an interesting one because a lot of this only came about because Frank Spotness was at a convention and a fan said to him, "What happened to investigating Melissa Scully's murder? Why hasn't that been resolved?" And Frank Spotness was like, "Oh yeah, we didn't figure that one out. Oh, we should probably do that. Cue this episode." And, you know, I can harp on about this until the cows come home, about the fact there's no show Bible, and this just goes to show how little attention any of the writers, I know they're focused on other stuff, but nobody's paying attention to continuity at all. And that's really frustrating. So, yeah, we start out with... also this episode, introduction of the black oil. We'll get to that. But, yeah, I just wanted to... we'll talk more about it. But, yeah, this two-parter is mainly... Melissa Scully's murderers and the black oil. So, you know, there's a setup. So surprisingly though, this is connected to the Nisai 731 two-parter. And even going back to Blasting Away Paperclip because of Krychek's involvement and the fact that he had the data tape and the DAT tape and stuff. So, we start out this episode with these divers, this diver getting taken over by the black oil, and coming back. And then we cut to, that's the teaser. So we got this guy Gautier on the loose with the black oil. And then we find Scully being stopped by Skinner and told that the police have given up searching for Melissa's murderer. And she's like, "Are you kidding me?" And you can really feel her frustration. She's like, you know, we could go into all these details of profiling, you know, when it's other than standing in somebody's room. We can profile these bombers and stuff like that. But when it comes to a woman being murdered, we just can't, nobody can be bothered to put the manpower in. And genuinely, from her speech, it's really impactful. It starts out really well with that. And she goes down into the basement and she's still frustrated and Mulder's like, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "Just nothing." And she looks like she's ready to punch somebody at the first opportunity. I'm bringing stuff up in chronological order before we get into the meat and bones of this two-parter, because there's some really interesting setup here. Regarding how these episodes work, because as I said, we've had a lot of friction between Mulder and Scully this season. There's not all the time, but there's just been some things that have very easily ticked them off about each other, and I don't know if that was mirroring what was going on between David and Gillian in real life at the time or what, but yeah, they're just at odds a lot. There's just, like I say, it's not all the time, But there's just certain things that really bring their differences to the forefront. But while Mulder's talking about the Talipus from Nisai and the ship that he saw, the spaceship he believes he saw in that episode, he's then, saying, oh, there's more down there, they're diving for it, blah, blah, blah. And Scully's like, well, did you check this out? And he's like, yeah, I checked this out. And then she's like, but what about this? And he's like, I checked that out. And she's like, I'm constantly amazed by you. And you're just like, wait, what? And in this really very Spotnitz dialogue, she talks about how his relentlessness is just mind-blowing. Everybody's telling him, you're wrong, you're an idiot, you shouldn't believe in this stuff and that, even her. And he just keeps searching for the truth regardless. It doesn't matter what the truth is, or how hard it is to find, no matter how buried it is. He'll go get a backhoe and dig it up if he can. And he's like, that's what you think of? She's like, maybe not backhoe, but, a shovel. And it's just really, it's something that you really see through the series later on. The fact that this drive is infectious to her, that she really respects the fact that, he doesn't just give up, even when everybody's telling him to. And of course, later on, don't give up would become a mantra for the series. But I just think it's this dialogue is a really interesting telling point for these characters at this point, and like the journey that they've been on. And unfortunately we then get episodes that kind of reset some of this development, and that can get frustrating. But I just think this is a really nice dialogue. And we continue the episode with the black oil plot. And okay, I have gone on record to say that the black oil is easily my favourite part of the myth arc. But even, because I just find it creepy. I find it creepy and unsettling, and its mode of infection and that is just really well done, particularly later on when they show the under the skin slithering and stuff like that. However, even I have to acknowledge how convoluted and ridiculous it gets. So here we start out with it in a very basic mould. I mean, it's insane to think that we had the purity control mentioned way back in the early Mire Flask at the end of season 1. And it's taken until now for the black oil to even become a thing. I think the interesting thing for me about this episode especially, and it then flows over into Apocrypha, is Skinner's arc. So Skinner, who I did not talk about in Paperclip, finally stands up to the cigarette smoking man. This is where you pucker up and kiss my ass. It's still the best line, and I'm so gutted that I didn't mention it when I spoke about Paperclip. But Skinner has had a really interesting arc this season, because he has finally stood up to the smoking man, who has constantly been overlooking his actions and dictating what Skinner should do with Mulder and Scully, and what cases to send them on and whatnot. And finally he stepped out from that. He's like, no, screw you. And he's been on Mulder and Scully's side. He's made deals, like that tape and stuff. Even though he then got that take stolen from him by Krychek and this Louis Cardinal. But he has continued to just be on Mulder and Scully's side, even though he probably shouldn't have. And we'll see this more with, say, Avatar and that when we get to... And, it comes up again later in, say, Kitten or whatever. But seeing what Skinner does to protect these two is just fascinating. But unfortunately, that's now come back to bite him in the arse, because now you've got these goons, because Skinner is clearly trying to protect Scully and stopping the telling her, just stop. They've stopped looking into Melissa's killer. You should probably leave it alone. We'll look into it another time. He's trying to help her. But because she's still looking into it, these guys go to Skinner and is like, well, you should control your agents better and stuff like that. And Skinner's like, yeah, whatever, sod you. And walks off. And he ends up getting shot later on by Louis Cardinal, who killed Melissa. And it's fascinating that this is finally, because later on, through Avatar, he gets controlled even, Smoking Man. I should talk about that when we talk about Avatar. But, Smoking Man's like, I'm not having this. But even after being shot, Skinner still stands by Scully and Mulder and, the truth and catching Melissa's killer. And I just find it really, really interesting. I find it way more fascinating and deep than possibly the rest of the X-File in this two-parter. I love the Black Oil, I do. But I'm more invested in the characters and their arcs. And whereas the Black Oil is a good vehicle here to get Mulder and Scully to San Diego, for Scully to be at that Navy base, and seeing memories of her sister and that, I don't like the fact that she didn't have these memories when they were last in San Diego, or that Melissa has not really been mentioned since what happened in Paperclip, which I guess is hence the fans' frustrations that were voiced to Spotnitz. But yeah, I find the characters, their stories in this way more interesting than the X-File itself. And as a result, there's some good action in this episode. Mulder and Scully work well with what they're doing. There's a lot of... I don't think it's as good as Nisai or 731, to be honest. I think there's some... If you're after a good, Black Oil story, certainly before it got way too convoluted, then this is a good one to start with. And there's some good imagery, and it's nice to see Pendrell, who is the MVP of this season, the secret MVP. Again, I didn't mention his work during Nisai 731, but bless him, he's done all the work looking into Scully's chip in this episode, and the follow-up Apocrypha. He's doing the work to help find Melissa's killer, and they're talking to these other cops, and I don't even remember Scully's what led up to it. They're like, oh yeah, we're never finding this guy, and Scully's like, I've seen stranger things, and she walks off, and Pendrell's just sat there going, I believe she has. It's like, oh, bless him. I love Brendan Bice's Pendrell is just amazing. So yeah, it's good to see him. He does good work here. But just, I don't know what it is. I don't. I love this two-parter. And to be honest, I'm gonna just bundle these two in together, because instead of talking about them separately. Because it genuinely does feel like, an hour and a half story. Did it need to be an hour and a half? Probably not. But there's a lot happening here. You've got Krychek getting captured by Mulder, and I love their chemistry, just beating up each other and stuff like that. Again, it gets a little repetitive, and I don't feel Mulder's anger is anywhere near as much as it should be towards this man who killed his father, who caused Scully to be taken. I never get the amount of anger from Mulder that I probably should do for his feelings towards Krychek. I don't know. it always feels quite held back. I love seeing when Scully finally catches this Cardinal guy. She's fighting the desire to shoot him, and she doesn't, and you could feel that anger within her. See, that anger was so raw and so heartfelt. It felt so much truer than Mulder, if you know what I mean. I can't explain it. And she's just fighting that just raw desire to shoot this guy in the face. Poor Skinner is laid up through the second half of this two-parter. But, again, he's still giving information. Yeah, this two-parter, I really enjoy. I do. I just don't feel it's as good as Nisai 7 Foot. I don't know. Can somebody, I can't explain it. There's a lot happening here. And there's a lot of good stuff. I just don't feel it's as good. And I don't know. I don't think it should go in S. I really don't. This is a tough one. It is a good two-parter. I can't explain it. I just... You know what it is? I think it's those black and white scenes. Which, by the way, secret guest star very young Michael Bublé. If you ever thought that he couldn't look any younger than he already does. Non-speaking role in the flashbacks on the Zeus Faber submarine. I get that they're... let's put this back down here for a second. I get that they show this... what is the guy's name? The old guy that she goes to visit. I was going to say Anderson, but it's not. It's something like that. They show his side of the story, even though, they don't in a way. He locks the guys in the infirmary with this guy that's infected by the black oil. And also, I'm sorry, I'm confused about this. So, the black oil goes out through some drain, supposedly into the sea, but then ends up in this person that's in the sunken plane that they went looking for? Or something? I'm confused. Because then the French people, the Gautier who goes down, he finds the guy living in the boat, in the airplane that's down there, and then he gets infected by the black oil. There's a little confusion there. That's probably just on my part. But anyway, yeah, they have these flashbacks where they show the guy locking them in the infirmary. But then it shows their side of the door. It doesn't cut back to his side of, locking them in. So then when you go to Apocrypha, which has a flashback at the beginning of this guy telling a young Bill Mulder and Smoking Man about what happened, it then shows the black and white flashbacks again, and it feels a little repetitive. And I feel like they really dragged down the pacing of the episode. They're not continuous, but they just come up and they just seem to take up time where I'm like, oh my god, I get it. And I do... My other thing with the black oil storyline is it just feels constantly, and this is for later episodes, all the black oil seems to be wanting to do is get to its spaceship. In Apocrypha, we have Krychek getting locked up in a 1013 silo. And again, there's some amazing cinematography there. Just the image of this crane shot of Mulder and Scully stood with their flashlights, beaming around this big, tall, cavernous area. The stuff like that, and then when they get chased by the army men and stuff, there's some really good genuinely there's some really good action here. But the black oil constantly wants to be going to a ship, and this is a recurring storyline, and it gets really repetitive. And of course, this is again, as I said, with Syzygy for Carter's obsession with doppelgangers. This is the first one. This is where it starts, but it continues from here, and it gets repetitive as a result. So, Yeah, I really do enjoy this two-parter. I just don't think it's as strong as Nisai 731. Even though they are super duper connected. It's insane actually how much. It doesn't make sense. I don't get they're like, oh, well, it was brought up there, but they're searching for something else there. And you're like, why couldn't it have been anywhere else other than where the Talipus was? It just seems silly to go back to the same place just for the sake of connecting it. But like I say, it is shocking how connected it is. I don't know. It's not bad. Oh, I'm so torn. The question is Piper Maru or Apocrypha better than the other one? The problem is there's so much set up. The stuff in Hong Kong, completely pointless. Seriously. And how does everybody know that they have to find Krychek? The Black Oil is using all these people because it knows that Krychek is the person to get to then get to Smoking Man to get taken to the silo. And we're shown as well that people with the black oil don't really talk. Like, Gautier doesn't talk at all. Except then Krychek talks to Mulder. And you're like, oh, okay, make your mind up. So it's really inconsistent, and that bugs me. There's a lot of heart. There's a lot of emotion. And there's a lot of good action. I'm going to put it in this. I feel unfair putting it in A. Because there is a lot of... Again, there's a lot of good character study here, I feel. So, yeah. I'm going to put those there. Yeah. Moving on from that quandary, here's an episode that I do not need to question at all. And let's just put it straight up there. It is Pusher from Vince Gilligan. One of his best episodes. This is where he really hits his stride with the writing. And not just because, I know, this episode is super shippy. And the Mulder and Scully interactions are just adorable, and I love it for that. But genuinely, Robert Wisden's Robert Patrick Modell is really unsettling as this narcissistic guy who feels small in the world and wants to be more important, and thanks to this brain tumor has the ability to use like hypnotic power of suggestion, if you will, to control people. You know, he likes to stick with people and cause these crimes, but because he doesn't technically cause them, he can't be committed for them. So yeah, Wisden perfectly plays Modell. You know what, I hadn't even heard of the colour cerulean blue before, but every time I hear of it now, this episode is all I think of. Mulder and Scully's investigation is a lot of fun. We get lines like, you know, explain to me the nature of the whammy, which is funny because then literally I think like an episode or two later, what is it? It's Wetwired, so a few episodes from now. But we have Scully going on about stuff going wiggy, and you're like, wow, Scully's picking up colloquialisms from Mulder. I love the Mulder and Scully interactions. This concludes with a very tense Russian roulette scene between Mulder and Modell. Modell, who sees Mulder his kind of successor in a way, his Padawan. And unfortunately, Russian roulette, after it featured in the film The Deer Hunter, which I wasn't a big fan of, it's become this really overused attempt to get people's attention. But this episode, it is so tense. I don't think I ever saw Russian roulette done in such a tense way ever again until like the more recent Walking Dead season 10 bonus episode with Robert Patrick in, ironically. this scene with Modell and Mulder, and honestly, try and say that 5 times quickly. I've seen, from the time it aired, I've seen a lot of people gripe that Mulder should have been able, honestly, apparently Mulder should have been able to fight Modell and save Scully. And I'm like, no. I mean, he had no issue shooting himself. He put no fight up for that. And yet he, honestly, aiming it at Scully, you can see how much he's trying to fight it. And when he's like, I'm gonna kill you, Modell, and you're like, yes. And of course then, when Scully pulls that fire alarm and the connection is broken, Mulder goes absolute and shoots constantly at Modell. And the anger there, it's level to when Mulder shoots CSM. I mean, it's more so than when Mulder shoots CSM in the end of My Struggle 4. Oh, yeah, I had to mention that. I'm sorry, you've made me think of My Struggle 4. But it's that rage, and it's that rage that you could really feel in, say, Ascension that I mentioned before. The idea that Modell would make Mulder point a gun at Scully, you can feel that rage when he and that just exhaustion afterwards is amazing. And that is far more interesting and fun to me than just, ooh, Mulder should have saved Scully. It's like, no, he gave her the ability to save both of them. He was like, get away, Scully. You know, he was fighting it. He would have stayed there and done whatever it took. He would have shot himself again. And it's just, I think that scene is way more fulfilling to me personally for it than if Mulder had been able to go, no, Scully, I will save you, and turn the gun on Modell. It's a nice idea, but yeah, I've never, somebody's going to dredge up a post that I've posted somewhere, you watch. I've never really bought into that idea, and yeah, and the scene, the hand-holding scene at the end is beautiful. There's always just the friendship between these two is just beautiful, and there's good action in this. There's good tension. I really enjoy Wisden's acting. Mulder and Scully are amazing. Just everything about this episode, perfect without question. And yeah, couldn't. It's annoying now because whenever I see Wisden in stuff, I'm just like, it's Pusher. But yeah, perfect in every way. I don't think I really have much issue with it. There's probably something. There probably is. But I don't. And I'm not, and you're not going to make me say I do. It's my tiering list. Next up, we have got... well, we have an episode that exists, so anyway, moving on. Okay. Teso Dos Bichos. Could you come up with an episode more just iconic for its awfulness? One, you gotta feel bad for John Shiban, who apparently he had this idea for, this idea of this jaguar spirit, and then Chris Carter comes along and he's like, how about with your jaguar spirit, we have the killers be something that you would never expect, i.e. house cats. And I can only assume that Chris Carter has either never owned a cat or certainly never worked with one. Because here's the thing. See, this is my very loving kitty. She's very loving and very purry as long as she's getting attention. But there is no way on this planet, is there, that she is ever doing what you want her to do. Because, yeah, her life is her life, and you are there to serve her. So, yeah, there's no way, if she's pissed off, she will growl at you and then avoid you. There is no way she's attacking you. There is no way, I know they work with trained animals and stuff, but yeah, there's no way, is there? She's not leaving now. She's like, no, I'm comfortable. Thanks. And this is what I mean. There's just no way. I don't care if she was possessed by a jaguar spirit or what. So yeah, just no, Chris. Moral? Cats are scary for what they don't do, not for what they actually do. It's the power of suggestion of them just staring at you in this kind of, I'm going to kill you, but only in their mind. And as a result, this script went through so many rewrites that they ran out of different coloured printer paper to print the new pieces of script onto. That's how, I believe it was called Double Salmon or something, because they came back round to the salmon paper. Kim Manners, who had to direct the shit show, kind of literally, hated working on it so much that he printed up t-shirts for the crew that read, I survived Teso Dos Bichos. It's that renowned. And also, we have to feel bad for guest star Tom McBeef, who thankfully isn't in the whole episode. Because I feel bad, because I know him more from Stargate SG-1 and that, and other stuff. And I met him. Really nice guy. He had a very tiny role in space in season 1. He was one of the engineers that Mulder and Scully briefly talked to. Which means his 2 guest spots have been on quite possibly the show's worst episodes, or certainly most mediocre. This episode actually genuinely has an interesting idea here, in that preservation of archaeological finds. So it starts out in the teaser with this guy digging up this Maru, I believe it is. It's like an urn with a shaman woman or whatever in it. And the local people, always well depicted on this show, with their translator Belak, like, no, you shouldn't disturb it. And I think there's an interesting discussion point here regarding digging up stuff. The archaeologist, who I don't remember the name of, he says it's preserve it because the land is going to be used to build on and stuff like that. So they want to save it to stop it being destroyed. And that's an interesting idea, but at the same time then it's getting disturbed and unsettling spirits and stuff like that. But the problem is the archaeologists in this episode are depicted as self-righteous, self-serving, greedy gits. So you never at any point really feel like they're doing it for the good of the finds and the history and the, all that stuff. They come off of just these sleazeballs that you don't care about. And Belak, who gets high on Yahe, which I had never heard of Yahe before. Thanks to this episode, now, I watch stuff, and now I know he's a fan anyway, but Andy on Outside Xbox, I've seen him mention Yahe in that before, and I don't know if he's making that connection, but I only ever think of this episode whenever I hear Yahe mentioned anywhere. It's so bizarre. It's always funny when I always joke now about learning stuff from the X-Files. But he is... So Belak is absolutely off his tits high the whole episode, which doesn't really help. And I don't know if he's possessed. See, I thought he had an inclination, because when you see him high, you see the view of the Jaguar spirit. I thought the idea was that he was supposed to be possessed by it, but then you're just seeing these cats that are supposedly possessed by it, so I was a little confused by that. And it just blows my mind that you watch this episode and you're like, how did this episode go through so many rewrites and end up like this? Like, what did they start with that they then had to rewrite it and then try and keep retooling it and reworking it to end up with whatever this is? There's one point where a dead dog turns up and they try so hard to get this joke about the dog that ate the cat that ate the rat, because it turns out that this rat had eaten some rat poison that then the cat had eaten, and then the dog got poisoned. And you're like, surely by that point in the food chain of digestion, that poison wouldn't be as effective? I don't know. I'm not the expert on that stuff. But I felt like they put way too much effort in to make that joke about the dog eating the cat eating the rat. And I was just like, oh my god. This episode just doesn't work. Easily. I have spent way too much time on this episode. It's not even worth it. Is it worse than Space? No, but both episodes are extremely mediocre and pointless. I'm going to have to put it there. It's just so bad. And I feel bad for everybody who worked on it. And of course, again, there's the fact that Gillian Anderson, it turned out, nobody thought to check this maybe before writing a whole idea around this. Gillian Anderson is allergic to cats. So they then got her fighting with a puppet cat. And the fact that this cat would have never attacked anyway is bad enough. But then you see the behind the... I mean, the scene in itself is bad enough. But you see the behind the scenes footage of her with this puppet that looks nothing like a cat. It's so bad. And I think it was covered in rabbit fur or something. It's hilarious. It's so bad, and nobody talks highly of this episode, and there's a good reason. So yeah, there's a good reason why that had to go there. I think you could all guess why. Next up, we have more mediocrity, unfortunately, with Hell Money. Guest starring BD Wong, Lucy Liu, and James Hong. So, amazing cast there. Kind of put towards this slightly racially insensitive, xenophobic episode. It started out as... Again, this is one that Chris Carter contributed towards. He had this idea for this pyramid scheme that was totally rigged, that he then added on to on top of writer Jeff Fleming's idea of dealing with corporates, what was it, their treatment of the destitute in Chinatown, and taking advantage of that, and body parts being stolen and stuff like that. Yeah, it does come off a little xenophobic, and it tries to be an X-File. Like, you have these image of ghosts at the beginning and these symbols that are used, but there's nothing paranormal here at all. The whole episode just turns out to be this underground lottery that's totally rigged by these rich guys who take advantage of these poor people who are trying to pay medical bills and stuff by taking their body parts, like eyes and whatnot, and then selling them off. And you're just like, okay. Yeah, it's really seedy, and maybe I wouldn't feel as dirty if it had been done in, like dealing with maybe the homeless in a normal city anywhere in America, but to focus on Chinatown, it feels a little, you're like, finally they're dealing with some other ethnicities, and then you're like, oh, this is the episode they went for. BD Wong's character is really all over the place. Like, he's helping him out, and he comes up with this line at one point where he's like, just because I talk the talk, just because I talk the talk doesn't mean that I'm, everybody still hides stuff from me and stuff like that. I'm not one of them. I'm a cop. I'm an Asian cop who but then you never feel it, because it turns out that actually he's dealing with these corporate guys that are running the lottery anyway. And you're just like, okay, so he was a dirty cop. So yeah, it just feels a little all over the place, if I'm honest. Lucy Liu is, I didn't know she was dating David Duchovny at the time of this episode, but, everybody praises her for her role in this. She's not that big a part, and she is really good to watch in that. And I love Lucy Liu as an actress. I love her in other stuff that she's in. But I just don't feel like she's doing her best necessarily here. I don't feel like she's given enough to warrant this amazing praise that she gets. Like I say, it's not that she's doing bad, but she's not that big a role. It is fun to see, obviously. I think more the praise is that she came from the X-Files and then has become this massive star. And I think that's the thing when you think of people like Jack Black, Ryan Reynolds, Lucy Liu and stuff like that. Especially this season has seen a lot of those kind of people that have gone on to become big movie stars and that. But I've always enjoyed this episode in the past. It's really unsettling. The idea of, like, this lottery of, being desperate enough to try and go, please, I need this money and that. And your body parts getting taken. And these bodies turning up with frogs. That image of that frog coming out of the unstitched cadaver is creepy. But Mulder and Scully don't feel all that involved. Scully's just like, do you know how much the human body worth? And Mulder's like, it depends on the body. And you're like, okay. But there are interesting themes here. There are interesting subjects. I just don't feel it's used to its fullest potential. As an X-File, as a story, it's like, you've got excellent actor James Hong, and he barely features in, like, 2 scenes. He's barely featured in this episode, and you're like, oh, I would have liked to see him more. But, yeah, I don't know, I'm gonna get so much flack for this. This one doesn't hit for me in the way that it should. It is entertaining. I'm gonna have to put it on B though, because it's just it's there. It's competent. It's creepy. But I just feel it tries to start out with this paranormal concept, and then it's like, that's not really a thing. And then just devolves from there. And obviously, as we've seen over and over again, not all X-Files stories have to be paranormal or supernatural or that. But I just feel like this one struggles to have a reason to have Mulder and Scully there. And then for them to continue. Like, the cops could have easily continued this investigation. There was no reason, really, for Mulder and Scully to still be there. So, yeah, I I just feel it struggles on that level. So yeah, I just find it a bit mediocre. And I completely understand if you like it, and I look forward to seeing your thoughts in the comments. Please, please, please share your thoughts. Because like I say, I used to really like this episode. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old, and maybe again this season, just watching these episodes back to back, it just didn't hit for me. And maybe if I'd watched it any other time, maybe on its own, maybe I would have put it in A. But as it is, for this watch through, I have to put it in B. Next up is our final, technically, fully, final Darren Morgan episode of the season and for the show until the revival. And as a result, he knew this was going to be his last episode, so he kind of threw everything in, including the kitchen sink, I believe. And as a result, this episode is a little surreal. Maybe a little too surreal for me. The stuff with Lord Kinboat and stuff. Like why it's done in that the stop animation style and that just over my head a little bit. This is a really fun episode. I have issues with it. I don't think it's anywhere near as strong as the previous 2 episodes this season. But I think it's got a lot to say, and I mean, you've got some excellent guest star. Charles Nelson Riley as Jose Chumg is just chef kiss good. Is perfect and so much fun, and he and Gillian really bounce off each other really well. It's hilarious. It's fun to see the stupendous Yappy brought back for a bit, and seeing like the alien autopsy video. There's a lot of fun callbacks to previous episodes, and generally the idea that as Chumg says, truth is subjective. Like, everybody's version of the story is so disparate. It's just so completely different from each other. You can experience the same thing and yet still tell a different story. And there is a little uncomfortableness where it's like, wait, did the boy rape the girl or what at the beginning? But then it turns out they just had consensual sex and that. But yeah, I think it's really interesting the way it tells, and it tells it in such a bizarre, fun way, where you get all these characters, and especially then when you see characters' versions of Mulder and Scully. That is so funny. Honestly, this episode is so funny, but it's just a little too surreal for me that it takes away from that. And that's just me. That is just me. I have the same problem with, say, watching something like Monty Python. Sometimes it's just a little surreal, that I don't get the full enjoyment out of it. And I mean, even Rob Bowman said, the director of this episode, has said that, it took him a good 20 times or whatever going through it, and even then, he doesn't feel like he got all the nuances that Morgan was intending, or for people to take away from the story. Stuff like Jesse Ventura and Alex Trebek turning up as Men in Black and stuff like that. That stuff I'm just like, that's random, okay. And it's fun. It's fun to watch. But I don't feel like I'm getting the full intention of its placement, if you see what I mean. I'm not taking away its full meaning, kind of thing. Otherwise, it's a fun episode. Really entertaining to watch. Like I say, that it doesn't always. I'm always confused why Mulder refused to have anything to do with discussing with Chumg the case. And there's this really kind of hostile, aggressive kind of scene between them at the end, where Mulder's like, you're a liar and you're working for the government or whatever. You're just trying to get sales. And Chung's really hostile back towards him. Chumg, who has been a sweetheart this whole episode and a lot of fun, is just so, go away, Mr. Mulder, if you're not going to tell me. It's like, okay, that came from nowhere. And I don't like the scene of Mulder wanking to watching a video of, like, Bigfoot, you know, the classic Bigfoot video. He's just laying there wanking, watching it, and I'm like, okay. And then under this dialogue about how, you know, trying to get any joy out of life, and I'm like, wow, Darren Morgan really doesn't like Mulder. Wow, no wonder David Duchovny takes issue with how Morgan treats Mulder. Yeah, I was like, that seems a little odd. I'm sure there's some meaning behind it and that, and, you know, but I felt it was a bit unnecessary. Otherwise, best highlight, of course, of this episode, besides Charles Nelson Riley, is Larry Musser's Detective Manners, who's named after Kim Manners and talks like a sailor. And because obviously network TV, and because for the joke, all of his swears are bleeps, blankety blanks. To this day, I still every now and then, like if I'm around, say, my godson, or I try not to. Jane doesn't like swearing, so I try not to swear around her. Sometimes I slip if I'm really emotionally charged in that, but I keep trying to do bleeps and blanks and stuff like that, and it's so perfectly done, and I don't know how they got through some of those scenes without just... I'd love to know how many takes some of those scenes took. But yeah, his bleeping, blankety blank hole is just brilliant. I love it so much. It's so clever. And again, a good riff on the whole network television language barrier thing and that. It's really good. It's really... it's sad that this was the last Darren Morgan script for until the revival, but at least he went out with a bang, I guess. We gotta put it in S even. Duh. Yeah, we gotta put it in S because it's Jose Chungg. It's not as good. It's nowhere near as good. I mean, you know, Clyde Bruckman was a lot of pathos and tragic and heartfelt. War of Coprophages was just making fun of stuff and a lot more fun. This goes for that surreal humour and wit. And that is a very me thing that struggles with that. Otherwise, this is a brilliant episode. It's not one I necessarily go back to, but I always enjoy it when I do watch it. But next up, we have got Avatar, and this one is a Skinner-centric one that actually came about because David Duchovny requested that he and Gillian Anderson get a bit of a break. I think they were starting to film, they might not have been, but certainly I think they were getting ready to film maybe the Fight the Future movie. But anyway, either way, they needed a break. As a result, Duchovny does get a writing credit on this. I don't think he contributed anything besides please make some other character the centre of the episode so we don't have to be in it as much. But it's interesting though, because it's easy to forget how much Duchovny and Anderson, you know, shouldered the show, that it was just what they were the main focus. And I know we get other shows, you know, especially crime dramas like Murder, She Wrote or you know, Columbo, and those kind of shows that were one character. But now we live in a time with a lot of ensemble shows, and it's easy to forget that something like this, where the X-Files lived or died by the fact that Weather and Mulder and Scully were in it. And I get frustrated because the one thing I wasn't happy about in William B. Davis's memoirs. He was going on about some situation where there was an Emmy that they were nominated for Best Ensemble Cast, and they were sat there and they were like, they hadn't decided who would go up and collect the award if they won. And apparently Duchovny turned around and said, well, after some silence, Duchovny said, well, I'll go get it. And William B. Davis in the book is just like, well, I guess we're not really an ensemble then, are we? And it's like, okay, I get that frustration, but as much as this show depends on characters like Skinner and Smoking Man and Krychek and all the wider supporting cast, Mulder and Scully were this show. They were in every single episode, for 24, 25 episodes in a season. So yeah, it's not an ensemble in the way that we're used to now. So I can understand by episode, what is this, like 20 or something? I think we're up to episode 20. Whatever it is. I can understand why they would want a break. And I think the funniest thing is you watch this episode, it doesn't really feel like they're in it any less. They actually feel like they're in it quite a bit. Although Skinner is the focus, and it's his story, and it's a very personal, thing. It's interesting to see, that he does have a wife. I am a little frustrated that he puts the wedding ring on for a while, but we never hear of Sharon ever again. And actually the wedding ring disappears after a while even. So it would have been nice to have some follow-up. But at the same time, I feel like they lay enough groundwork in this episode to show how much Skinner is a private man. Which is why we never would have heard of her before or would again. A lot of fanfics, I'm not even kidding, insist that Sharon dies in this episode. And I never got that impression. I mean, yes, she flatlines, but that was when Skinner then saw the old lady. But then Sharon's awake and she tells him something, about where to go and stuff like that, I assume. But I never got the impression that she actually died, and nothing ever gets said, and again, she never gets mentioned ever again, so I don't know. But yeah, there are a lot of fanfics that insist she died, and I'm like, okay. So I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. If somebody knows something, can they let me know in the comments? Maybe I'm missing something. The fact that she flatlined and nobody came along is a bit disconcerting, but anyway, you don't really feel Mulder's going to investigate to help, because Skinner is accused of killing this prostitute, possibly in his sleep, because it turns out he's had this sleeping disorder for the last 3 months. And it's funny because it's Amanda Tapping, who would later go on to be in Stargate SG-1 and be an excellent director and stuff like that. It's funny to see her in one of her earlier roles. She doesn't make it past the teaser, much like, say, Ryan Reynolds. I don't think you're really a star on this show unless you've, not survived the teaser. But yeah, so Skinner's accused of killing this prostitute, who he didn't know was a prostitute, but actually he's been set up. This episode is the culmination of everything that has happened, essentially, and I mentioned it when we talked about Piper Maru. This episode essentially is a culmination of what Skinner's character has gone through this season regarding ignoring the Smoking Man, standing up for Mulder and Scully, and trying to not be under Spender's control. And the Smoking Man stepping in and going, no, you're my pawn. I use you as I want to. And after the failed shooting, basically setting him up and making him look guilty. And, making it all go away if he just works for him again. And it's really sad that poor Skinner has to go through all this just because of standing up for Mulder and Scully and stuff like that. The fact that these strings that are being pulled by higher ups are controlling the actual flow of truth and justice and stuff like that. So yeah, I think this is a fascinating culmination of that story, of that character arc through the season. He's not fully under Smoking Man's control, but he's still trying to just move on, hide it, whatever. Yeah, it's a really good episode. I think it's a really good character study. And again, I never really felt like Mulder and Scully were in it any less than normal. I mean, they are, but you don't really feel it. It feels really natural, really well handled. I don't think it's a perfect episode by any means, just entertainment-wise. It's not one I will necessarily automatically pick up to watch. I would, if I had to choose between this and Kitten, then I would pick this one hands down. I find it way more engaging. And again, it's good to see the callbacks to Skinner's time in Vietnam and stuff. It's funny to see the badly photoshopped hair on Skinner's head in the wedding photo. And I like whenever Skinner's around Sharon, he automatically takes off his glasses as if like Sharon time is his non-work time, so glasses off. Glasses are work, non-glasses are personal. I find that a really interesting visual like distinction. I thought that was a really interesting thing to take away. You know, he goes up to her bedside and that, and he automatically takes his glasses off. I don't think it's perfect. I don't even think it's like on the level of these episodes. But I just think for what it does, character-wise, again, story in the grand arc of the show, etc. I don't know. It is quite tense. I'm confused though by the luminescent stuff that's on Amanda Tappin's character around the mouth and nose. They're not able to identify it. Apparently, it's just some natural occurring enzyme that I assume was, I don't know. It never gets followed up. It's just like, well, it disappeared. We got no proof. It could be from a visitation or whatever. But we're always led to believe that she was actually killed by these guys. So I felt like that was a red herring that was clumsily placed there. I like it. I think it's good. I'm going to put it in A. I don't think it's as standout as these other episodes. I think it has a much larger implications story-wise. But yeah, it's just not one that I automatically go to. I feel it's a bit slow and a bit trudgy at times. I really want to put it in S. Oh, that's a rough one. I don't think it's outstanding. I'm going to leave it in A for now. See how I feel at the end. Yeah. I can understand why people would put it in S. But I'm going to leave it in A. I can understand actually why people would put it in B, to be honest. Because I do feel it's a little slow at times. But no, I'm going to put it in A. I like it. I really do. It's just not as catching or memorable necessarily as some other ones. Next up, we have Quagmire. Giggity, giggity. Sorry. So, Quagmire is as monster of the week, I think, as you can get. It is also, though, the episode that is why I've technically been saying, like, technically, see how many times I can say technically here. Darren Morgan did, it's credited to, I think, Kim Newton or somebody. I could be wrong. I think it's Kim Newton. I'll have to put up on the thing. But Darren Morgan apparently did a lot of rewrites for this, and you can feel it. It feels like a Darren Morgan episode. It's not officially, and I think really he just did rewrites as opposed to, like, he didn't come up with a story on that. But it feels, I mean, you have the stoners from War of the Coprophages making a return. You got Queequeg being, the existence of Queequeg being remembered, which is nice because we've not had that since War of the Coprophages. There are a lot of elements here that make it feel like, and it's so quirky. It's a Monster of the Week episode. It's a lake monster story. That Mulder believes might be because of this legend of this big blue in Hwevelman's Lake. He goes for that fun. Turns out it's an alligator. It's the most mundane thing. I don't know how this alligator got there, how it survived this long, and how it hasn't done more damage before. Also, it moves super fast, which is impressive because alligators don't move that fast on land. So how none of these things people are noticing it until it's too late is impressive. And why nobody investigated, like, when these frogs were missing. But anyway, there's a lot of wit, fun dialogue, a lot of fun interactions between Mulder and Scully that just feel very Darren Morgan. Like I say, I don't know the extent to his participation in the rewrites, how much was rewritten from the original script. But yeah, it feels like a Morgan script, and that's why I'm like, technically he kind of partook in 4 scripts. But this is a fun episode. It's a fun, like I said, there's a lot of good dialogue between Mulder and Scully, a lot of fun banter. It is sad to see Rip Queequeg, poor Queequeg, who was, I guess, like William, you can't have something dragging down Scully's ability to go at the drop of a phone call to be with Mulder. On a case, as somebody who has a dog, I can tell you can't just walk out of the house without somebody to watch over. Yeah, there's a good story here. There's a good investigation. I enjoy the back and forth with the sheriff and that. The really deep, when Mulder takes these pictures that this photographer took and who's trying to show Scully, what is this, a tooth, is this, and he's trying to see any little thing in one of the photos, and Scully's like, you'd see Jesus in a potato chip, or whatever. It's you'd see Elvis in a potato chip, which is something that comes back in Empedocles, I guess. But yeah, I think there's a lot of fun dialogue here, and of course we get the infamous conversation on the rock, COTR, which became a big thing in the fandom, and I get why, but I've never really cared much for it. I think it's interesting in the grand scheme of Scully noticing the correlation between Mulder and Ahab, and then later in season 4's Never Again saying about other fathers that she's had to deal with, and as somebody who seems to be attracted to father figures, there's a lot of connection there. I think it's a little uncomfortable that, she calls her dad Ahab, and then it's like, oh, Mulder, you're Ahab. It's like, why don't you just call everybody Ahab at this point, Scully? Seriously. I think it's a really interesting, again, character moment. I just don't feel it's as deep as some people make it out to be, and it's not as sweet as I like the joke about, you've lost weight, haven't you, recently, Scully? She's like, yeah, thanks for no, excuse me, after talking about cannibalism. It's a fun dialogue. It gets overhyped in the fandom, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, I get it. Conversation on the rock, yay. Because now we have conversation on the log, and every time apparently these two characters talk together, there has to be a moment that gets solidified in the fandom. No, I get it. I really like the dialogue between these two in this episode. I am a little disappointed by the reveal of the alligator. It makes sense in, Mulder's had this whole thing, the whole episode, that it's something amazing, and it just turns out to be something mundane, and Scully's like, you caught the monster, why? And he's like, oh, I just want to believe. And then you have this awful CGI Loch Ness monster in the lake at the end, and you're like, okay, really? Felt a little unnecessary. I get it's a nod and a wink to the audience, but I really like this episode. I really do. I always, when I watch this episode, I always have a good time. I think it's an interesting concept to if you're going to take something like the Loch Ness Monster mythology and stuff like that, legend, and take it to, this show hasn't done really lake monsters before, so I think it's a good attempt on it, and I find it really enjoyable, and I'm going to put it in S rank. Yeah, it's not outstanding by any means, but it's a very quaint, simplistic tale with a lot of good characters and enjoyable dialogue. I can't argue with that. That said, I will say, because I didn't mention it when I've done other episodes, I am a little frustrated that Mulder constantly introduces himself as Special Agent Mulder and Scully. Now, Scully is a special agent as well. And this isn't connected to this episode, but I realised I hadn't mentioned it earlier. I think Piper Maru was the one that I really wanted to mention it for. It's bad enough with the whole Mulder's office thing, that Scully has to knock on the door and constantly. I don't know where she goes when she's not at Mulder's office. Seriously, it's just like, why isn't this their office? And we could go round and round in circles about no Scully's desk, no Scully nameplate on the door and stuff like that. I just hate, again, it feeds into that whole Mulder's the hero and Scully's just there, and this is something that will become worse throughout the series. Sorry, I'm really frustrated by this, but I just don't get why Mulder constantly just goes, Special Agent Mulder, Agent Scully. What the hell? So yeah, that's just something that really bugs me, and there's a number of things here that really bug me with his attitude and the way she is treated. It's bad enough for the longest time the network insisted that Scully had to walk several steps behind Mulder, and it took ages for that to be fixed. And I know, 90s and all that stuff, but yeah, considering Scully is this feminist icon and stuff like that, I just feel like she really got treated like shit on this show sometimes. But anyway, that was just an aside I really wanted to mention. But next up, and I say that as well because this next episode, this poor woman, Wetwired, which makes Scully go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So this episode is brought to us by special effects coordinator Matt Beck, and it's a lot of fun. It is really creepy. It deals with it goes along the line of, say, season 2's Blood, of these subliminal messages that are being shown to people to make them paranoid and to make them lethal. It's basically they're being tested. Seriously, it's essentially Blood, but slightly less overt. It's literally this slightly undetectable signal that's on the, you know, your RGB kind of scale on a TV. I guess it wouldn't work on on modern TVs, but on the old CRT ones, apparently this signal was being broadcast, and it makes people go crazy and kill people because the paranoia gets too bad. And Mulder and Scully watch these videotapes that are that were being kept by this one guy who went on this murderous rampage, killed his wife and that. And they're watching it, and conveniently, for this one episode, Mulder apparently has red-green colour blindness, which makes him immune to the signal. Now, my issue, not only with this random red-green colour blindness that I thought would have affected his ability to get in the FBI in the first place, but apparently not, is they're watching the tapes at speed. They show them watching the tapes, fast forwarding through them. Surely through the static of the fast forwarding, because when you see the lone gunman looking at the signal later on, and they show it at the bottom of the bar on the test card screen kind of thing. It's like something at the very bottom. I don't understand how that pattern that is negated by them slowing down the pattern, why it isn't negated by fast forwarding through the picture. Like, not only do you have the static lines that come up when you're forwarding the video, but also surely the signal that's like a pattern, a rhythmic pattern, wouldn't be as visible when the tape is being forwarded. It bugs me. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe, you know, I'm not the expert on subliminal messages put into code. But yeah, I'm like, why? If it had shown them just watching the tapes flat out, that would have made sense. But so much of the time we see of them spent with the videotapes is them fast forwarding through it, and you're just like, okay. But it is fun. It's interesting to see that Mulder's conveniently not affected. But as a result, Scully is. And her paranoia, apparently, she is so far in at this point that the thing that drives her crazy is the idea that Mulder has gone to the other side and is working for Smoking Man against her. It feels a little too close in a way to Anasazi, if I'm honest, with the whole, you know, paranoia. Mulder had the drugs there, and it kind of made sense that he had that paranoia about Scully's, you know, placement with him and stuff like that. Not by that point, but at the same time, if it was an underlying issue. But it's interesting in a way. I kind of don't like it on some level, but at the same time, I like the idea that she's so far in at this point that the idea of Mulder working with Smoking Man is the thing that makes her super paranoid and just so on edge. It's kind of hilarious and upsetting, and yeah, I think it's fun to watch, because you go through a whole slew of emotions. And of course, the one person she goes to is her mum for protection. And Mulder's like, you're the only one I trust. And she's like, no, you did this to me and stuff. And considering how much we see in the show, how much Mulder feels this guilt towards the death of Melissa and her abduction and everything that's happened to her, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't deny it or anything when she says, you did this to me, you put that thing in my neck and stuff, and he stands there, and it takes Maggie stepping forward to go, no, Dana, you're wrong. That's so sweet. I felt like the resolution with then Scully in hospital and Mulder's like, and she's like, oh, I just believed you were this and the other. And Scully is essentially sidelined for the rest of the episode while Mulder goes and deals with everything, and you're like, okay. It's like, keep Scully away, she might be dangerous. I do think it implements, because you're seeing it through another source is the one who feeds Mulder this story. And it's because, as I mentioned in 731, is that Stephen Williams, who plays X, was working on another show at the time, so he didn't have the time to commit to the X-Files. So he only turns up at the very end, and I think they implement that need to work around him quite well here. Because Mulder's like, I don't know who you are, I don't know why, and especially then, when he thinks Scully might be dead. When the police call him, the coroner's office call him in to identify a body that they think might be Scully. And he's like, I don't know who you are, my partner might be dead, this, that, and the other. And you can feel that anger. And I think because it's somebody that he doesn't know, and I mean, he doesn't trust X anyway, he doesn't know that X is involved. But it's interesting to see that he's like, I followed you even though I don't know you, and now this has happened. And the guilt that's within him comes through, and it's heartbreaking. The Duchovny acts out really well when you feel him going to go check on the body and stuff. You're just like, no, Mulder. Oh, it's so sad. So yeah, I just feel everybody's acting is on point here. It's really good. I love the paranoia of Scully. I don't like the way it's done to her, but at the same time, I do feel like it's a retread of Anasazi. But yeah, I really enjoy this one. I probably shouldn't. But I gotta put it in S. I gotta, because it's just that entertaining. It's just a lot of fun, and really interesting, and I don't like the way Scully just essentially disappears at the end. That it's no longer her story, even though this was done to her. She's just sidelined, and I'm like, okay. But all the lead up to that is really fun to watch, and really moody, some really good music to drive home that creeping feeling of paranoia and that within her as she's watching things and questioning things. So yeah, I'm gonna put that in S. It's entertaining. I really like it. I never, like, if it comes on, I'm never like, oh, not this one, I guess, or something. I'm always like, oh yeah, let's watch that. So that's why I gotta put it there. But we get up to the season finale, Talitha Cumi, which I've heard called Talitha Cumi, so, you know, which, Cumi, potato. I call it Talitha Cumi, so that's what I'm going to call it. And where we see the introduction of Roy Finners as Jeremiah Smith. And the thing that makes me laugh about this episode, though, is much later on near the end, Scully finds all these Jeremiah Smiths listed, and it's very reminiscent of Colony Endgame, with all the doctors, the Gregors, and she pulls them all up on her screen, and she's like, she doesn't question it, she's like, it's like something clicks in her head of, oh yeah, I've seen this all before. So, but yeah, we're introduced to Jeremiah Smith, who's this alien who can heal people with his touch. And conveniently, it comes about, he comes into the picture just as Mrs. Mulder has a stroke while talking with Smoking Man at their summer house in Quanakatog. And it turns out Smoking Man was there. He tells Mulder later that it was some bullshit about, oh, I was there, I thought I knew where Samantha is, and you're like, yeah, right. It turns out actually he's there looking for the stiletto, the plan, that can kill aliens and alien bounty hunters. Now later on, it's said that this is the only thing that can kill them. Mulder knows it's the only thing that can kill them. And X is like, yeah, gun won't do and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, could they have not known this? Why didn't the Samantha clone know this in Colony Endgame? Again, this is the joy of things getting added onto the myth arc later on. But surely when Mulder said to, organise for Skinner to have a sniper there and stuff at the swap between, when Alien Bouncer had Scully. Surely Samantha would have known and said something that the sniper wouldn't work, that only this plan would do. But apparently not. It's conveniently only become about now. So, yeah, the iconic stiletto, with its... Apparently they went through so many mechanical sounds and that to try and find... And then it just took somebody going... To then go, that's the sound we need for this coming out of the, cylinder. Just this simple pressure sound effect. And you're like, really? That's what it came down to in the end. Surely that would have been logical. Just a simple... but apparently not. That wasn't their first thought. But, the iconic stiletto. I love the stiletto as a use for, like, a weapon for the alien bounty hunters and stuff. I'm pretty sure it got used in Alamaya Flask. I am pretty sure it got used in the earlier episodes. My brain is drawing a blank. I don't think this is its first use at all. But I could be wrong. I would have to go back and check that. But this is the first time Mulder has seen it. It turns out that it was hiding in this summer house. And you're like, okay, that's random that Bill or Tina would make sure it's hidden there. And then Smoking Man is like, oh, you know where it is. Why don't they have it? Because then later on, X is like, where is it? Give it to me and stuff like that. Sorry. He's at the house. He's showing Mulder these photos that he took of Tina and Spender arguing. And he's like, oh, he was here for something. And Mulder's like, I don't know what. And X is like, okay. And then you can tell he's totally trying to get the information on this thing. So... It's interesting to see X become more of a player in this, in the lead up to what happens to him in the start of season 4. Especially because we saw at the end of Wetwired, where we saw that Smoking Man was clearly a little suspicious of X. I don't think he believed X at all, where he was like, who was telling, leaking this stuff to Mulder and stuff, and who was leaking that stuff to that guy, kind of thing. So you saw that distrust kind of coming about. But I think this is a really... I feel like this episode drags. Once they catch Jeremiah Smith, and then they're waiting for the bounty hunter to turn up. And you have these scenes of, again, any excuse, I guess, to get Jerry Hardin and Peter Donat back in. Smith shapeshifts into Bill Mulder and Deep Throat, and it's fun to watch them rattle CSM's chains, just to freak him out and force him to release Smith before the alien bounty hunter gets there. But the problem is, it seems convenient that these are the only two skeletons in Smoking Man's closet that Smith would use as a way to shake Spender, because obviously they're the only two we know. So I just feel generally, as fun as it is to watch Smoking Man be manipulated, he's always got this bravado and that, but the second it's like, oh, you're gonna die of lung cancer, and I could treat you, I could heal you, and stuff like that. It just drags a little bit. I don't know what it is. I just find it a little draggy, and they keep going back to him, and you're just like, seriously. Also, I'm still confused by I say about Scully finding the numerous entries for Jeremiah Smith, but are there more than one Jeremiah Smith? What is going on there? I was a little confused by that. That felt like something that was a bit... I was like, oh, is he a clone or what? But yeah, I feel like this is the beginning of the end for the good mythology, because I feel it gets way too convoluted beyond this. Uh, and yeah, I love the introduction of Jeremiah Smith and that, especially for later on when he gets brought back for the This Is Not Happening Dead Alive trilogy. Uh, but for this episode, and it ends with so after being released, Smith goes back to work so Mulder and Scully can find him. I was like, okay. Um, but the ending, it ends on this cliffhanger where Bounty Hunter catches up with Smith, Mulder, and Scully. And it feels a little too reminiscent of what happened in Colony Endgame, where Scully gets captured again. And we'll get into that when we get into the next episode. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, it felt like a bit of an empty end, and especially because you're hoping for Mrs. Mulder to be healed, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, whatever. You just want her to be healed for Mulder, because bless him, he does look absolutely lost. And Scully is trying to assure him, it's just a stroke. People come back for these strokes all the time and stuff. But yeah, this is a lot of groundwork. I don't feel it's a particularly amazing season ender. But at the same time, it's not a bad episode. It just drags at times. But it's still entertaining. It's still really good. I actually like this one. I'm going to put it in A, because I don't think it's outstanding by any means. But yeah. So that was technically season 3. But we are going to add one. Because, of course, there is the X-Files game, which has been designated an official 3X99 episode code. Which is problematic because, of course, it contradicts the joy of something that is set in a season but doesn't come out until long after that season has ended, is that we have, say, X is magically alive again, Pendrell is alive again. Pendrell doesn't die until much later on, but the point is that, yeah, X, especially, with this, Talitha Cumi Herrenvolk story plot, is where X comes to his end. So we have X coming back in the X-Files game, and you're like, well, wait, where does this play us? Especially because X has the stiletto in the game. So, yeah, it's got a 3X99 designation. It doesn't necessarily fit in... It's kind of like a slightly alternate universe, if you will. But it's got that number, so I gotta have it here. It took me 15 installments of a video series. That's more because I didn't script, and back then we weren't allowed to do videos longer than 10 minutes and stuff. Otherwise it would have been a much shorter series. But the X-Files game, which focuses on Mulder and Scully investigating something, then they go missing, and then another agent, Craig Wilmore, not the one from Syzygy, who's up in Seattle, where only 2 agents work. I'm still not letting that go. He's called in. Assistant Director Skinner goes there and is like, please find my agents. Bless him, he's so sweet. And it just follows Wilmore as he's investigating, trying to track down Mulder and Scully, and ends up getting embroiled in the conspiracy with crooked agents, and the conspiracy, and CSM, and X, and the black oil, the newly fangled black oil, which now, so the developers of this game were reluctant. They didn't want to make this game and I think they then watched some of the show and were like, okay, yeah, we'll make this. And I can understand why. One, tie-in games are not very good classically, and certainly not looked back on particularly well. So I guess you don't want to get yourself in that. But of course, there's a big mythology to this series, so I can understand why you wouldn't want to get tangled up in that. But they decided to make the game, and unfortunately, it was started at a time where the black oil wasn't fully realized, where a lot of the mythology, I mean, it's never been consistent, but it was still being molded and stuff. Just, I mean, it was always molded to please episode to episode's needs, but sadly it didn't have much of a foundation because not much had happened yet. But the black oil is used, and unfortunately somebody came up with the idea that apparently the stiletto takes down people that are infected by the black oil, which is not how it works. So that is a big myth arc issue. The story is quite basic, but once you get, I mean, Mulder and Scully aren't really there because obviously they were working on the show and then the movie and stuff. Unfortunately, Craig Wilmore is not a particularly engaging character. I don't really care. He's a divorcee with a daughter that he doesn't get to see. But he's not particularly all that interesting, and I guess they've done that for players to put themselves on, in a way. It's not that he's badly acted at all. Jordan Lee Williams, who plays Wilmore, is actually really good in the role. And somebody brought up in the comment section that a couple of years now, he'd passed away, which was kind of sad. I think he was mainly in the theatre acting circle. And yeah, it seemed like he had a good sense of humour. So it's sad that he passed away. But yeah, he was really good in the role, but I didn't feel particularly engaged with the character, especially then when they tried to get him. They tried this chemistry with this female detective that becomes embroiled in the case, and you're just like, okay, they're trying to force it a little bit, but at the same time they had really good banter. It's actually a lot more fun. I've always thought of it badly, and I think that's because so much of the hype was around Mulder and Scully being centered, but actually they're barely in but when they are there, they're really well written. The story has a lot of plot holes, but it is engaging, and you do feel driven to keep going with it. I would probably put it around... I would put it in... I don't know where I would put it, to be honest. God, that's so bad. Let's say B. We'll put it in B. Because it is problematic. And unfortunately, that's as a result of being a video game that is in production for a length of time. Where you start and where the show ends are two very different places. So yeah, I feel like there are way too many plot holes, but everybody acts their hearts out. The dialogue can be a little but at the same time it feels true to the character sometimes, and the story, I think if it hadn't had so many plot holes, it would have been more engaging. So I wouldn't put it lower than B. It's not awful. It's certainly better than say something like Teso Dos Bichos. But yeah, it's not outstanding. So that's the X-Files game, and that's season 3. Yeah, it's... I've got a lot of S-rank games here. S-rank stories here. Actually, a lot of the myth arc ended up being S-rank, surprisingly. But I think the main appeal to this season is Darry Morgan and Vince Gilligan's inputs. It's not that the rest of these episodes are bad by any means. I just feel there's some mediocrity here, and there's some good but problematic episodes. So, and I just, like I say, I stand by the fact that tonally this season is just all over the place, and just, it's not a very good binging season. But that's season 3. Season 4 will continue and start up with the continuation of Talitha Cumi's cliffhanger. But we'll get back to that next time. Please share your thoughts. I especially look forward to hearing your thoughts on these episodes that I've not favoured, if you will. Especially if, like I say, it's about Dehan Develets. Feel free to take me to task, because I may come away and go, actually, yeah, why was I so down on that one? I stand by my thoughts on this. I have forgotten a lot of things. It's so annoying, because I watched these several months ago. I recorded my video, but then had issues with it. I ended up editing it a lot. Wasn't happy with it. Just scrapped the whole project. And then have come back now to re-record. But of course, it's been a while. I did then... I was editing, and I was doing my least favourite part. This is why these installments take so long. I hate getting the screen captures. It takes me so long to do, and it's so tedious. I really hate it, so it takes me a while. But I was going back through the episodes, doing the screen capture, and I got everything in my head that I wanted to say. And then I've sat down to record, and there's a lot of stuff I've forgotten again. So, I ended up going back to episodes, talking about DPO or whatever later on, and I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't mention that then. Or randomly mentioning about Scully only getting referred to as Agent Scully and stuff like that. It's so frustrating, because I'll have it in my head. There's stuff I want to take issue with, there's stuff I want to congratulate and praise for being amazing. But then whenever I'm in front of the camera, it's like my brain just goes... It's awful, and I apologise. So there is a lot of stuff I've missed out. But please, I look forward to sharing your thoughts. And I look forward to seeing your comments. And please, take care, everybody. Stay safe. Stay well. And I'll see you eventually. I promise to try and not let it take so long next time. I'll see you somewhere down the line.